We will go ahead and turn the time over to Chief Eden. Chief Eden, or Gorden Eden, is a retired chief of police here at Albuquerque. He has 42 years of law enforcement experience. He was a U.S. Marshal. He also ran the State Academy here in Santa Fe for the police officers. And then again, he was chief of police here in Albuquerque. One of the most genuine and just caring persons that I've ever met, especially as a supervisor, and one that was over a large department, the largest in New Mexico. So I do appreciate it. And I appreciate you being here today, Gorden.
Glad to be here. I'd like to start off by saying, first of all, what you do every day is very important to the community. And what you do every single day is help people through probably what could be the worst day of their life. And I think knowing that, and after doing this job for so many years, there's something that you need to know, is that there are people there to help you through the worst days of your life. All you have to do is be open to it. One of the things we talked about the other day when we were prepping for this, I talked about two things that I see that had a personal effect on me. Both of them were guilt and grief. And I'd like to just share with you a couple of stories that have to do with guilt and grief, and try to walk you through some of my personal experiences. I went on the New Mexico State Police in 1975, and I know for some of you, you weren't even born yet, Melissa. And I'd been on the department maybe 5 or 6 days, and we got called out to a fatal accident just east of Tucumcari, New Mexico, where a husband, wife, and 3 children had died as a result of being struck by a train. Anybody that's ever investigated a train accident, you can really understand the devastation and the damage that is done. Through the investigation, we were actually able to determine what had happened was the husband had lost his job, and they packed up their personal belongings and they were headed west towards California, hoping they could find a job there. When based on the investigation, we felt that in the greater likelihood of what happened was the father did park the camper right on the railroad tracks as a train approached, killing him, his wife, and 3 children. So the guilt part of that is wishing you would have been out there trying to do something to prevent something so horrific from happening. The grief is just seeing a whole family gone. No survivors, nobody left in that family. And then just wishing there was something more you could do for somebody. Another thing happened just months after that, and I had become really good friends with a young gentleman that lived in San Juan, New Mexico. His name was Ricky. And one night, Ricky had called me and said, "Hey, are you available? I'd like to talk to you." And I said, "No, I can't." I said, "I'm on general hours. I got to stay here. You're more than welcome to come by the apartment if you want to." He goes, "Nah," he goes, "I think I'm just going to go have a couple of drinks and then I'll head home." Probably about 2 or 3 hours later, dispatch calls me and tells me that there's a major crash on US 66, head-on collision, multiple fatalities. And as I got there and I was working the crash and working through the crash and trying to identify everybody, both the truck driver and the driver of the pickup truck were killed instantly on impact. They probably hit each other head on at speeds in excess of 70, 75 miles an hour. It wasn't until I was going through the personal belongings of the person in the truck that I recognized that it was this young man, Ricky, who had just called me hours before that. I don't know what was going on. To this day, I don't know if the accident was a result of him attempting suicide, which is what happened, or just a freak accident. In my mind and in my heart, I still believe he was reaching out for help. And the guilt part for me was not being there to help him whatever he may have been going through. As I shared with the group here, it is in law enforcement, we see so much trauma, and the trauma is real. We're there all the time. We see the grieving on the parts of mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and it just makes it really difficult. And I reflected back when I was at the State Police Training Academy as one of the training officers. We'd always tell the cadets to suck it up, buttercup, and suck it up, suck it up, suck it up, suck it up. And I think while that may sound like the right thing we should be doing, I think there are just times where we need help and we just don't know how or where to get it. So a personal reflection again, in 2008, my brother committed suicide. And it was very, very devastating. Everything that happened around his suicide impacted his 4 boys, his wife. It had an effect on my kids and so many different people in the community. It was kind of odd that days before he committed suicide, he had taken his 3 sons out individually and told them how proud he was of them and how he'd be there for. One of them was getting ready to graduate from high school. And another one would graduate 2 years later, and he said, "Yep, I'll be there for you. Don't worry about it." And then he committed suicide. On top of that, just, and I was unaware of this, days before that, one of the people that also worked for me, that she had a relative who had committed suicide. And probably the day after my brother committed suicide, one of our deputies in Las Cruces, his brother committed suicide. So it was just trauma on top of trauma for us. And one of the guys that worked for me, his name's Tom Bauman. And Tom Bauman came up to my office and he said, "Marshall, I want you to know, I think we need to call in peer support." And I said, "Tell me, what is peer support?" He went through the process of telling me what peer support is, what they're able to do, and their main mission is to help people through difficult times. And I said, yes. I said, "Tom, let's get him in here. I think we're all going to need some help." The team that the Marshal Service had assembled was probably one of the best groups of people I ever had an opportunity to work with. Their mission was very clear. It was what in the Marshal Service we called a collateral duty. It wasn't their full-time job. It was something that they did on the side. One of the rules in the Marshal Service is that they bring in somebody from the outside that is not acquainted with any one of the individuals that or groups of people that have been impacted. So we had a deputy come in from Dallas, and I believe the other one came in from Houston. And I was very pleasantly surprised to find out how well not only my family, but the families of the other 2 that had been affected by suicides, how grateful they were that the Marshal Service had this peer support team. For me, one of the things that happened, it threw me into being a father figure for 3 boys that I had never expected by any means. And I will tell you, I don't regret the years after that at all. It was all 3 of them are doing exceptionally well, but I'm telling you, they wouldn't be doing that well right now if it wasn't for what happened with the peer support team. We all learned different types of mechanisms to help each other, the supportive things to do. Sometimes you can get caught up as, and somebody's going to have to help me out with the right word here. We're enablers, and how not to become an enabler. And I will tell you, to this date, I still am in contact with the boys, and still I'm in a position of using what I learned from the Marshal Service team even today. And what a great team of people it is. Just to give you a little more information, I was so happy what had happened. I shared this information with my federal partners, U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, ATF, all of which ended up starting peer support teams, not because of what I did, but because I made them aware of what peer support can do for people. And as I said, it's a great group of people. One of the exercises we went through one of the evenings with all the family, they put us in a circle and we all had to identify with one word something that described the way we felt. And as they looked for volunteers, I decided I'd go first and say I was pissed. And it was interesting to hear some of the other people's one-word feelings: anger, frustration, bitterness, sadness, emptiness, and all of those things. Those are the emotions that people go through when they're grieving. But what we did learn is how to support each other, regardless of what position we were in or what phase we may be in or how we're feeling at the time, but to help them or to help us understand what they were feeling and to work through a life-altering loss. And from that day on, which was in August of 2008, that's when I recognized that this is something that I had to do for the people that I worked with, the people that I worked for, families that we came into contact with, and really, quite frankly, never expecting to use it as much as we did while I was the chief of the Albuquerque Police Department. And I've got to say thank you to so many people that are out there, and I'm afraid that if I begin to name names, I'll forget somebody. But I just kind of like guide you through what happened in 2015. January 2015, Officer Luke Olson was shot on a traffic stop. Got to the hospital just as soon as we could. Lou was actually in x-rays. They were still trying to figure out exactly the extent of his injuries. We encountered Lou's wife and did everything we could to support her. Later in that month, Jacob Grant was shot. It was a blue-on-blue shooting. I got to the hospital even before Jacob had gotten there, and when they were unloading him from the ambulance, I think, if my memory serves me right, Jacob was shot 9 times. And didn't know it at the time, but his entire chest and stomach area had been shot. Jacob saw me there, and if you have a chance to talk to Jacob, he will tell you that he remembers seeing me first. There was a decision made by a doctor there, Dr. Harrell, to take him right to surgery, Dr. Drew Harrell. And as we were going down the hall to get into the elevator, a person of good intent from the hospital, one of the chaplains came up and said, "I understand there's somebody here to be given their last rites." And I told them to get the fuck off the elevator. Jacob kept asking me, he kept saying, "Chief, you got to promise me you'll take care of our family." And I told him, I said, "Jacob, you're not going to die. You are not going to die. You are a fighter. You're going to live, Jacob. You just keep fighting, and we'll be there for your wife and children. I promise you." And for those of you that don't know, Jacob spent literally months in the hospital. Most of the time, his chest was never closed. They never had gone in to do the skin grafts. We became really close with Jacob, his wife, and their kids. To this day, we talk to each other frequently. I asked Jacob one day, when they finally let him drink, it was like a little Q-tip, and they let him dip it in the ice water and he could wet his tongue. And I said, "Jacob," I said, I think there's something else you would like. And he goes, "Yeah, cherry limeade." So I jumped in the car. We went down to Sonic Drive-In, got him a cherry limeade and snuck it into the hospital. But Then Jacob, again, that was the end of January. Then February, Ray Loomis was involved in a off-duty motorcycle crash, massive head wounds. None of us ever thought Ray would survive, but Ray did survive, and again, became really close with him and his wife and his family. Then in March, John Kelly passed away on duty. He had a fatal heart attack during a training exercise. Tell you how paths continue to cross. I mentioned Dr. Drew Harrell was there when Jacob came in from his shooting. And when I got to the scene where they were working on John Kelly, Dr. Harrell was there, and he motioned for me to come over and talk to him. And I asked him, I said, what are you guys doing? And he goes, well, we've done everything we can. He goes, you know, I'm the head of the emergency department. I've given him every drug, everything that I can. And they were still administering CPR on John. And I told him, I said, you can't leave him here. He goes, what do you mean? I said, you can't leave him here. You cannot leave him here surrounded by all these officers, these fellow detectives. You cannot leave him here. He goes, well, we have a policy, we can't transport dead people. And I said, has anybody declared him dead yet? And he goes, no. And I said, well, can we get him to the hospital? And that's exactly what they did. And every day I'm very grateful. A lot of people don't know this, but when Greg Benner was shot, I actually got a phone call from one of our officers that said a Rio Rancho officer had been shot. I got on the phone right away and I got a hold of the chief of Rio Rancho to let him know what had happened. I told him I'd head on down to the hospital. I got there just as they had brought Greg in, but Greg had succumbed to his wounds. Was there when Julie came in, Julie, his wife. And since then, we've been very close friends with Greg, Nigel's brother, sister-in-law, and Julie. And I think for all of us, one of the most devastating was Dan Webster. You know, Dan was one of those guys, you either liked him or you liked him. My first encounter with Dan was actually at a APOA meeting. We had a really good conversation, a really sound guy, good head on his shoulders, just a leader among leaders. And, you know, Dan, we were all hoping and praying that night that Dan would make it through it. But as we all know, Dan didn't. I think it was almost 5 or 6 days later. The doctors let us know that they had 3 brain scans 24 hours apart that were conclusive that Dan had no brain activity, which we later found out probably about 2 days after Dan had been shot, that they had ran one of those scans then and didn't have any brain activity or minimal brain activity. Dan was hard on all of us. And I say that because of who Dan was, not saying that John and Ray and Jacob and Lou and all these other people weren't that. It was just, Dan was one of those guys that if you liked him, you liked him, and that's just the way it was. And I just posted on Instagram, so feel free to look at it. This. The worst part about being strong is that no one ever asks if you're okay. The morning that Dan was taken off life support, the mayor called me about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and he asked me, he says, first time somebody had asked if I was okay. And I told him, fuck no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay with this. And it's the first time I've ever hung up on the mayor. And it wasn't because it was the mayor. It's because I was not okay. And thankfully, I have somebody that does ask me that all the time, and that's my wife, Mary. And if most of you, if you've been with the Albuquerque Police Department, there was almost every single event that we had at APD. Mary was with me. She was by my side. And we've been married since 1978. And she's really been just a tremendous help to me. So I want to talk about what happens during guilt, grief, and trying to work through these life-altering losses. Peer support is outstanding. It's the best thing. But what I found out after I retired, it never happened to me, but I'd have what's called night terrors. And they were absolutely horrific. There's no way to describe how bad they are. But the one that I had repeated over and over and over again, it was like there was this long room. And in that long room, there were these concrete, like an irrigation ditch. That's the best way to describe it. A diversion canal. And in that, I saw every dead body that I had ever encountered as a police officer. And it got to the point where I wasn't getting any sleep at night, but more important was I was afraid to go to sleep. And I will share with you, it took me about a year to finally reach out to somebody because I wasn't doing well. It's hard to live with no sleep. And I reached out to a friend of mine who is a psychiatrist, and I told him what was going on, and very joyful, he said, I can fix that. And I actually went to his clinic, I think that same day. He put me on a drug, and we talked about it the other day, it's actually to lower your blood pressure, but I've not had a night terror since then. It's been over 2 years that I have not had one, except about a month and a half ago, I forgot to take my medicine before I went to bed and had a night terror. Your brain is a very complicated thing. And when I talk about Greg Benner, that it happened and Nigel was killed in 2015, I had forgotten some things. And when I got to the hospital and they brought Greg in, I started having flashbacks, and I didn't realize what was happening to me. On August of 2007, Rio Rancho motor officer Jermaine Casey was killed in the line of duty while I was doing a presidential motorcade on a presidential visit here. And at that time, I was United States Marshal, and the Secret Service had asked me to get to the hospital as part of the motorcade. So I split off the motorcade and went to the hospital. And when they brought Jermaine in, I was there when they brought Jermaine in. As I got a hold of their chief of police, I had his cell phone number. He was on vacation. He was in Florida visiting family. And he advised me that he had just promoted a young man to deputy chief and gave me his phone number, and I got a hold of him. He came to the hospital, and we were waiting for the family to arrive. And I'm telling you guys, it's a small world. When Jermaine Casey's wife walked through, I looked at her, and we actually worked together at the federal courthouse. I had no idea that her husband was Jermaine Casey. She told me later on that when she saw me there, that she knew that Jermaine was dead, and nobody had to tell her that. But that's, again, I get back to your brain is a very complex thing, and there's nothing wrong with reaching out and getting help. I just wished I would have done it sooner. And I mean it. I think I lost almost 2 years of my life after retirement because like I was always exhausted, always tired. People could see I was tired. I tried doing the Excedrin or Advil PM. It's supposed to help you go to sleep, not knowing that me and Benadryl don't get along, which is the active ingredient in it. It kind of has a different effect on me. But I got to tell you, there are people that are out there and they want to help you. And one last story, because I think it's really important. About 5 months after Dan had passed away, it was probably a little more than that. It would have been in June of 16. One of the officers that was first on the scene when Dan had been shot had walked into my office, and I acknowledged him right away. And he said, he goes, "I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't work." And I asked him, I said, "What do you need?" He goes, "I need off patrol." I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll take care of it." And I did. I took care of it. I got him off patrol, worked with his area commander, worked with other people to get him assigned to something that would help him. Believe it or not, it's those little things that when you see somebody, especially when somebody asks you for help, know that there's a lot of things you can do to help them. You don't have to be none of the people in the Marshal Service peer support system are trained clinicians. They're people who are taught to listen and help guide you through difficult situations. We're blessed to have you, doctor. We really are, to have a doctor on board, a practicing physician. I know we stole you from the University of New Mexico. I did, didn't I? Yeah. And we were so glad to have you on board, because we knew how important it would be to have a practicing clinician actually run this unit. And there's really not much more I can say than this, is you don't have to be strong for everybody. The person you need to be strong for is yourself, and start to recognize what's happening to you, and recognize more important that your life does matter. If you're not here to help us, and I say us, I'm not the chief. When I say us, I'm talking about the community. Police officer suicides are at a record high. They finally made a decision nationwide to start tracking it. I'm telling you right now that if we had more peer support opportunities in policing, we would see those numbers be reduced. But the first step is acknowledge the problem and let other people help you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Does anyone have any questions for Gordon? It feels so weird calling him Gordon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if anyone has any questions for Gordon, you guys can always unmute, or you can type it into the chat. And my question is, I'm actually reading a book, and the first part, he talks about humility and checking your ego. And how if you don't do that, then it's harder to get help or ask for help, or even just to become better.
Yeah.
You said that you waited 2 years after retirement. How did you come to that decision that, hey, I don't want to say check your ego, but you are the strong person. You were the leader of the biggest department in New Mexico. How did you decide to check yourself and say, or humble yourself enough to say, I'm going to go get help?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with while you're in that environment, your adrenaline is always running, and especially if you're putting in a lot of hours. But what I noticed more is my relationship with my 2 children and my wife. That relationship didn't seem right. We've always had a very loving and caring family, and I felt like I was watching from the outside, and I was no longer a part of that because of the way I was feeling. And I can remember I told Mary, I says, I'm going to call the doctor and talk to him, see what, and they were very relieved and very grateful. And like I said, Mary was always great. She still is. But she helped me acknowledge the problem. And the reason I say that is because our relationship is extremely strong, and we balance each other out really well. And I would just hope that you have those type of people in your life, even if it's one of your patrol buddies. And so, got to have those great relationships, especially when they're reaching out.
Yeah.
Especially when they're reaching out. When they see that you've changed, there's a problem.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, all the studies show that for happiness and resilience, the number one thing is to nurture healthy relationships.
Yeah.
There's nothing comes close. I have a couple questions, unless there's some from the group.
There was one that came in from Detective Melendrez. It says, wonderful, candid presentation. I was curious if you had advice for younger officers for taking care of their mental health throughout a police career.
I think you have to find those trusted people that you can talk with. It's part of our nature to be suspicious of other people, but you got to remember that you work together. And what may be happening to you has already happened to somebody else. And you have to be the one. Let me flip it around. Okay. If you're my patrol buddy and I see something, I'm going to ask you, hey, you doing okay? You seem a little today. Is there something I can do to help? And I always felt that was my job as the chief. And I know we were on 2 calls together. I was the chief and you were answering the calls, but you know how I worked. I'd walk around to every single officer and make sure they were okay. The night of the Foothills shooting, when we had those 3 kids killed, the first thing I asked for, if you remember right, was peer support and the chaplains to get out there, because I knew how those officers would be impacted. That was probably one of the most horrific shootings we'd ever had. And it was so great to see the peer support people, the chaplains show up and stuff like that. But it's the same thing. You have to, if you're a sergeant or a lieutenant, it doesn't matter your rank. If you're in the same squad, do welfare checks on each other. You've got to.
I guess my question is directly related to that. You had mentioned in your talk that you wish you'd gone to help earlier.
Yeah.
Would there have been anything that would have gotten you there earlier? And what would you suggest people do for each other to get them there?
You know, it took me a long time to acknowledge the problem. It did. It did. And it probably took me too long. And I think that's one of the things where you got so many people that are trying to reach out to help you, and then you turn them away. And a lot of times, especially the people that we work with, if I were to call you and say, hey, how you doing? Anything I can do to help you? And you say, nope, I'm doing fine.
Sounds about right.
Then that's that familiar. I think that's you have to be persistent, and you really have to. There's people that are always out there asking, what can I do to help? And if there's nothing right then at that time, sure, it's okay to say, nothing, but check back in on those people, check back in on them. Interesting story. When Dan was shot, the next day, Mary and I were leaving to go to International Association Chiefs of Police Conference. And Mary, our next door neighbor, actually drove Mary to the hospital. So I told her I wasn't in a position to leave, and my daughter was with me also. We were getting ready to hold a press conference on, we had apprehended the suspect involved with little Lily's killing, the shooting, Lily Garcia. And so anyway, our next door neighbor brought Mary to the hospital. Mary had already taken off leave, and Mary decided she wasn't going to leave the hospital, that she wasn't going to leave Michelle alone, and she stayed there. And to this day, Mary and Michelle are best of friends to this day. Stay in contact with each other 3 and 4 times a day. There's a saying in law enforcement, and I want to tell you that it's not true. It's not true. We have so many police officers that are killed in the line of duty, and we always say to the family, we'll be there for you. And I found that not to be true. And the longer I was police chief, the more I found it to be true. And I decided that we weren't going to let that happen, that we were not going to let that happen, that we were going to make sure that those survivors knew that if they needed some, we'd be there for them in a heartbeat. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's important for you to hear that, because you're still out there working. And if something were to happen to you, or you need that assurance from us that we will help your family no matter what. And we made that promise, and to this day, I keep it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
Yeah, so we got 2 things that came in the chat. So Mark Aragon.
Hey, Mark.
He typed in excellent testimonial, Chief, and happy belated birthday.
Oh,
In case you guys didn't know, just like I didn't know until I saw on Facebook yesterday, Chief Gordon's birthday was yesterday. And so we are again happy that he is here. And then Andrew Shu, he stated, one moment that resonated with me and Chief Eden was at the onset of the Victoria Martins case. And that was a horrific homicide that occurred here in Albuquerque. He said, I remember that homicide was at the main and interviewing suspects. Chief Eden and some other brass arrived as I was running out to get a warrant signed. He stopped to talk to me in the hallway as the rest of the group headed to the elevators. And that's all he wanted to check on. It meant a lot that he sincerely had an interest in my mental and emotional well-being instead of badgering me for info to give to the mayor or the press.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that can all wait. And I think that's what we need to remember. Those types of things can wait. And I can go back to Lou, Jacob, Ray, John Kelly, Dan, all those things could wait. We need to focus on what's important, and our people are the most important asset we have, period. No ins, out. That's it. Each one of our officers has family, whether they're married or not married, it doesn't matter, they've got family. And I think that those are the things that make police officers very successful, is that they know that there are people around them that care.
It's true.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
I had one odd question. But did you have something?
No.
Was as you mature and go up the ranks, because it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood between the officers, does it start to feel like you're a parent, like these are your kids?
No. I think my attitude is that I did what they had done. I know how difficult it is. And when I say that is, even as a state police officer, the first 2 years I was at what's called a one-man duty station. So there's nobody around you, and every maybe 2 or 3 days you'd see a sergeant. You worked 7 off 2, worked 10 off 4, and that was 24 hours you were on call. And I think during those years that I was at the one-man duty station, you really learn how to survive by yourself, because you're put into a community where you don't know anybody. And but what I did learn, and as this went on through my career, is that in this job, you create friends for life. And it's a lifetime of friends. And I think that treating people, each other with dignity and respect, that is how you earn respect. Respect is earned, and I think that whether it doesn't matter what position you're in, people have to know that I care about you. And that's what this profession is all about. And you see that at these critical incidents where police officers have been hurt in a car crash or a shooting, a stabbing, whatever, that you're there. You're there. And that's what they want to know.
Nice, nice, yeah, that's a good answer.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments for Chief Eden before we wrap up? Rick Ingram said, awesome job, thank you. And then Ben Melendrez again typed in, thanks for everything, Chief and Mary. Your wife is on, which is awesome to see.
Oh,
and she was
there's Mary Eden.
she was laughing every time you talked about yourself. Awesome.
We've been a team for a long time.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. So I recently just celebrated my 9th. No, oh man, I don't even
Better
know.
get that straight there.
It is my 9th wedding anniversary. I celebrated it in August. How did you guys create such a strong marriage that you were able to last for as long as you have, and you're continuing to have that strong relationship? And I know a lot of people here are married and have relationships, and so I think that's always a good question to hear, or good advice to hear.
Honey, do you want me to go first from my perspective?
Absolutely. I've learned that after 40 years.
You know, I think it's mutual respect and support of each other's interests and responsibilities. He's as supportive of me as I've tried to be of him. And neither one has a role that's more important than the other. You know, he still is always present for whatever my needs are, our children's needs are, and others. And so it's a conscious decision, right? You have to work at it to make it work. And especially in hard times, we've had lots of challenges as a family. Our daughter has some very significant health challenges that we've overcome together, and we've done it as a team. And sometimes, you know, we have this agreement where we say, well, we can't both have a bad day. So today's my day to have a bad day, and tomorrow can be your day, but we can't have them at the same time, right? So really approaching life in that way, because those storms will come. But at the end of the day, we have each other, and that's what's important.
The second part of that is, she's right.
And don't ever argue when I want to buy shoes.
That is also correct. Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate everyone logging on today and being a part of SCION as we continue to learn from each other and to destigmatize asking for help and asking for other things. Sorry, Melissa, you.
No. I had one thing to add. I forgot to send you a little message, Jeff, so I'm going to add it in. This is Melissa Schultz. I'm going to be sending y'all an email with a survey attached, but we have a new question on the survey. If you would like to present on SCION, or if you would like to nominate someone from the first responder community, fire, police, EMS, anyone that you think would be valuable to our network, there's going to be a question there for you to put in their name. And if you let me know who it is, I will contact them and we'll try and get them on the network. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. With that, we will see you guys all next month in October. If I remember correctly, we have an AFR lieutenant that is coming on to speak, and she will be sharing her story. And I believe she's a part of their peer support team as well.
Yes.
And so it'll be a great presentation. So we will see you guys all next month in October.
Bye.